So today I want to talk about sociology of emotions. Our emotions are created also by the environment that we live in. There are many crowd mechanisms that influence how we feel and how we react. Emotions are contagious. When we see people at a football stadium, for instance, or in a conference room, they can share the same emotion. It can also happen that you get this deep emotional connection with other person based on their mirror neurons. Those are neurons in your brain that can reflect basically how others feel. It's also called empathy, when you can get into somebody's shoes and feel how they feel, connect to them on a deeper emotional level. We can also see things like herd mentality, that people base their decisions, actions, states, emotions based on the majority among them. If they see that a lot of people think in the same way, that they think, it implies that this way of thinking is correct. It's often seen also on the financial markets, where the herd mentality is very strong and some opinions about the future of the economy get very popular, and a lot of people bet on them, not because they have some insight, but because the rest is also doing that. The analysis of emotion is hardly ever used in the social studies. Why is that? It's because the emotions are very hard to measure, and then it's hard to make statistics that are relevant. Why is that? It's because it's very hard to identify and name the emotions that people are feeling. The same stuff, the same events can trigger different emotions among people, and they can call it differently. And a lot of people, they don't know what they are feeling, they don't know how to call it, they don't know how to properly express their emotions. It's also connected to the lack of development of emotional intelligence in people. The schools nowadays, the only reason they exist kinda is to prepare you to get a job, and in many of the traditional fields that the school system is based upon, which were the manufacturing, the factory jobs at the beginning of the industrial revolutions, don't really require a lot of emotional intelligence. So it's difficult to distinguish the emotions, but we can focus on some of the basic emotions. The 5 basic emotions are anger, fear, sadness, happiness, disgust, and shock. There is also a second group that can be called basic emotions, and it's satisfaction, happiness, worry, anger, fear, and regret. And some people may not even be able to feel some of those deeper emotions like sadness or happiness. For instance, if we have a narcissistic person, that person might find it difficult to truly feel happy or sad or love. The next important emotion that is also seen in some of the religions, like for instance in Buddhism, Buddha tried to understand the world. He was focused on dealing with the pain of sickness and the pain of death. And psychology also thinks that one of the core emotions can be actually the fear of death. And you can study it through learning about terror management theory. It's the fight against the fear of death. We can see the death in every step. We can see the rotting food, We can see people in our environment coming and going. It doesn't have to be a real kind of death that the people dies, the body rots. It can be people moving away from us, people leaving us, etc. And in many cases, the religion brings solution kinda to the sphere of death. Many religions offer you a perception of afterlife to help with this basic human emotion. They say, oh, it's okay, we're all going to die, but after our life here on earth, there is a never-ending life in the heavens or hell. So they deal with that basic fear by promising people life after death, for instance. Another important factor in the sociology of emotions is the recent division of physical and psychological form in human beings. For instance, Christianity held with that belief. They distinguished body from the soul. But nowadays we know that many of the psychological phenomena are actually connected with our physical body. For instance, placebo. Placebo is a fact that takes part in our brain but can affect our physical bodies. Also, a very important statistic, in my opinion, is that good social relations, good relations with friends or family, can increase the physical health by a lot. If we ask neurobiologists, the people who study the brain, or the psychologists, social relations are one of the most important parts of human happiness. The most important physical things we can do is to drink water, to eat good food, to have sunlight, to exercise, to have good sleep, but also the social relations. So having good social relations will increase our health and longevity. That indicates that our psychological mind is connected to our bodies, that our emotions can also shape our health, which is quite obvious. For instance, if you are feeling long-term stress, that can have serious effects, for instance, on your stomach and on your overall well-being. The next thing I would like to talk about is the emotional differential. It's a phenomenon that talks about different interpretation of the same event among people. The same thing can create different emotions in other people. For instance, if I show you a book, some people might look at this book and think about the title. Some people might think about how the cover looks. Some people might say, oh, I would design this cover better. Some people might say, oh, this book looks actually quite terrifying. The colors are very dark. So even if you show people the same thing, people can interpret it in different ways and think about it in different terms, which is very important to understand that the same signal that you are sending out can be interpreted in many different ways by different people based on their theory of brain, how their brain works. And this is also important in marketing, to understand how certain things can influence people's behavior. For instance, on the ads in the TV, you can see, for instance, that certain cars are marketed through showing you a happy family using that car. It's an emotion-driven ad. And that car is a promise that if you buy it, if you consume it, will increase the happiness of your family, which is a very shallow way of thinking about human relations. And usually people who are emotionally undeveloped think about themselves as basically the provider of goods. They feel like the social priorities in our consumer oriented world are theirs, and people around them also would like to have expensive things, to have this car, etc., etc. And the marketing experts derive a lot of value from that by offering an emotional state behind their products. The next thing I would like to talk about is how emotions help us navigate through our complex world. For instance, we use emotions to make judgments on some difficult subjects. For instance, in politics, a lot of people think about politics, they don't really understand the reasons, the economy behind it, or the political game that is behind some of the decisions. They use emotions in order to sabotage or accept certain ideas. We tend to segregate people. We see, oh, this person is bad, this person is good. So we use some basic emotions in order to simplify our surroundings. We also use an effect that is called cognitive dissonance, which is a very powerful effect. I will explain it with an example. Let's say that a man walks into a bar. He's dressed very nicely, has a black suit on, has an expensive watch, and we will connect some traits to that person based on their look, for instance. So we'll think that, oh, this person probably is patient, is hardworking, probably he's very nice and cultural. And on the opposite end, if we see a person that's maybe dirty or maybe isn't dressed well, we can say, oh, this person might be dishonest, maybe he's a thief, maybe he's lazy, etc., etc. And it's a way of simplifying the world. Later, if we talk to such a person, the cognitive dissonance might make it harder for us to actually spot characteristics that are not connected to our previous thoughts about that person. So if we see a very handsome, well-dressed man walking towards us and he acts kind of like an asshole, because of this cognitive dissonance, we might not notice some of that acts, and we might look more into the characteristics that are complementary, that fit with our view of a certain person, and diminish others. And lastly, I would like to talk about the reflected self. Reflected self is an image of ourselves built by our community. Because of shame, of the need to fit in, we behave like our community behaves. In order to have a lot of friends, you would have to change your behavior connected with each person. For instance, one person is very quick, very energetic, and you can try to mirror that person's behavior in order to fit in. And we also mirror the behavior and values of our community, maybe of our religion, of our political party, our family, friends, etc. All of those communities will shape how we behave. We want to be accepted, and by doing that, we can lose parts of ourselves in order to fit better with our community. This is, of course, a little bit of a trap. Sometimes you want to fit in. Maybe you are trying to get this job, you really need it. Maybe you need good connection with your boss, so you behave in a certain way that maybe isn't true to your true self, but can give you some gains that you need. But doing that long term can truly destroy who you are and can lead to depression and other bad psychological states. If you are friends to everybody, then you are enemy to yourself. That guilt and shame that we can feel from, for instance, being ourselves, etc., can lead to humiliation or degradation from our community. And that can lead to fear and anger. For instance, the emotion of shame is a very negative emotion that can lead to a lot of aggression. We don't like to feel ashamed, we don't like to be humiliated by others, and our response is anger. And that can actually be connected to quite a serious historical events connected to World War II. After World War I, Germany was a country that was ashamed of themselves. They had this moral dilemma that they were the country that started World War I, and also after it ended, the German economy was heavily depressed, so the Germans, a very proud nation, were ashamed of themselves. And this gave the rise of Adolf Hitler, who was showing to present Germany as this powerful nation. He was the fight against the shame. He wanted to make Germany great again, kinda. So that shame made Adolf Hitler be able to present himself as the retributionist, the person that will make Germany great. And although Hitler wasn't himself a perfect man, he wasn't an Aryan man, he didn't have blonde hair, blue eyes, he pushed that agenda of the perfect man, of the perfect man. There were also many different problems connected to the shame that Hitler could be feeling. So for instance, we know nowadays that Hitler was actually partially a Jew, and that could also spark a lot of shame in himself that could later be repressed and changed into anger, which shows that Hitler can be actually a reflection of the psychological state of people living in Germany, and he was kind of answer to their needs of pride. A similar aspect can be also observed in a movie called The Joker, where Joker is a product of his society. He is treated badly by people around him, by people on the streets, by the boss, by his therapist, and finally, when he goes on to his favorite TV show, and he's also made fun of him, there he snaps. I won't spoil you what happens, but he also is this ashamed person with guilt, humiliated by others, and he channels that into aggression. So there are things that are around you and that shape the way you think, not based on who you truly are, but on the values that are common among the communities that you are in. So if you want to change your values, if you want to make your habits, it's good to surround yourself with people that have the values, the way of thinking, they make the actions that you want to see in yourself. I encourage you to think, stay with yourself, to see what aspects of your life are created by you, that are truly your decisions, and that are truly the things that you want to do, and are not just part of this social structures of the values that are coming from your environment and not from you. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I wish you all the best. Cheers, take care, bye.